Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition to the Point Podcast. Everybody's doing well on this Monday following a wild weekend in the world of sports. And hopefully you guys all had a great weekend as well. I know I did. I got to spend some time with a few of my close friends from Fredericton. They made their way up here to God's country, aka Rexton. So spent some time there. So I've been off for a few days here, but ready to get back at it. The NHL really took the sports world by storm, even, surpassing the Olympics when it comes to notoriety and just, what's in the news cycle. Obviously, the NFL will be surpassing it, I'm sure, very quickly because we have training camps really opening around the league. We have the new COVID rules, which are really quite interesting to me. People are getting fired for not taking the vaccine. So there's a lot of debate. There's a lot of things to talk about. We have Deshaun Watson reporting. A report over the last couple hours says that Aaron Rodgers will, in fact, return to the Green Bay Packers this year. That's not definitive yet because their training camp starts tomorrow. So that'll be the real drop dead date. Does he show up? If he does not show up, the Packers can fine him $50,000 a day until he does. So what happens there? Deshaun Watson reports so he doesn't have to face the fines now because he's facing 22 civil lawsuits. The Houston Texans are willing to trade him. Now, he could be suspended to start the year. I think it's highly likely that he will be. But the guy's 25 years old. He's one of the 4 best quarterbacks in the National Football League. If the accusations against him are true, then he may never play again. But, teams are going to give him a chance. Michael Vick got another chance. Ray Rice nearly got another chance. There's guys that get second, third opportunities when you could say they really didn't deserve it because of past actions, things that their character and things of that nature. I don't suspect that Deshaun Watson, who's actually an elite player right now, Michael Vick was an elite player when he came back from, the dogfighting coming out of jail. He wasn't an elite quarterback anymore. We're talking about a guy who was 25 in his prime, who threw the most passing yards in the NFL last year, but unfortunately came up, had a 4-12 record. That tells you just how bad the Houston Texans are. I think they'll finish last this year again. So they're in a state of transition. They want to get draft capital. They want to start moving in new pieces. And ultimately, what's the NFL? It's a quarterback league. And they have Davis Mills. They have Tyrod Taylor on their roster, but they don't have the quarterback of the future. And that's really what they're searching for, where if they can have a bad season with Tyrod Taylor, go 2-15, then, he does his job. You're somewhat competitive in a division that I think you'll see Tennessee be a very good team. The Indianapolis Colts will be a competitive team. Jacksonville, who knows? You got Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer in their first seasons. You got Tim Tebow, for whatever reason, white privilege, being around again. But it's likely to be a bad season in Houston, and to get the stain and get Deshaun Watson out of the building, I think is something that they got backed into a corner here. He's got all these lawsuits. They wanted to keep him. Now they're like, okay, we'll trade him. We're willing to do that now because there's only negative coming with Deshaun Watson. It could be all positive in 6 months, potentially the 2022-2023 season, where his suspension's over, he can start fresh with a new team, and then Houston Texans may look back and say, what could have been? But for now, he's a guy that's going to be on the trade market. I suspect will be moved. And if I was a team like the Miami Dolphins, like the Philadelphia Eagles, this might sound crazy, the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would be very interested in Deshaun Watson. The Eagles and Dolphins are teams that have Jalen Hurts, have Tua Tagovailoa. Neither has established themselves as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Ben Roethlisberger is a Hall of Famer. That's a different case study. But at the same time, he's at the back nine of his career. I think he's in his last season. Getting a quarterback that may not be able to play this year. You have Ben play this season. You see how you do. He retires. Then you have the heir apparent ready in-house. Deshaun Watson is your starting quarterback. Steelers, you reload, and then you're in full Super Bowl mode for years to come. You still have TJ Watt. You still have Deontay Johnson. You still have Chase Claypool. Cam Hayward's still a very effective player at an older age. Minka Fitzpatrick is one of the best free safeties in football. So that's just a few teams that come to mind. I think more than a quarter of the league would be interested in the services of Deshaun Watson. So we'll see where that progresses as camp keeps going. I mentioned the COVID rules. So what's happening is around the world, you can't force people to get vaccinated. And I have been vaccinated, but I don't think people should be forced to be vaccinated. I think that's, it's called civil liberties. It's called freedom, your rights and freedoms. So I'm not on board with that. But I do think you see around the world, the United States is not in a good place right now. You have COVID positive tests everywhere. It's really as bad as it's ever been. You see Tokyo with the Olympics. There's no patrons. So it's tough. It's not easy like it is in Canada right now, where in New Brunswick, we won't be wearing masks come Friday. Hallelujah. But again, people have the right to make their own decision. But I do think the NFL can try to influence behavior. What do we do in life? I think of parenting. Obviously, I'm not a parent, but I think of seeing my parents. They influence you to make what they believe is the correct decision. And more often than not, it is the right one. So they lean you in a direction without telling you definitively, Noah, you should do this, or, X, Y, and Z. And for NFL players, a lot of them, the rule is if a team has a COVID outbreak and it is tied back to a player that is not vaccinated, and the NFL cannot reschedule the game within the 18-week season, then that team will forfeit the game and the entire roster will miss out on the game check. We're talking, for some people, millions of dollars. They would make zero for that week. And that's the big pressure point, because why do we do anything? Why do we go to work? Why do pro athletes show up? Yes, you love the game, you hear all that spiel, yeah, of course. But you go to make money. That's how you sustain life. That's how you keep going. That's how you feed yourself. So to have a whole week of preparation, to go through all the rigs and all this, and then to not get paid, you're going to have vaccinated players be pretty pissed off with their teammates who are not, if they don't get a game check. It's brothers in arms. And, NFL is tighter as a team, as a unit, than any other sport. I believe that to my core. However, cockroaches splinter, they go all over the floor when they hear a loud noise. And when you see the cage start to rattle, people are going to spread out. The vaccinated players are going to be pissed off, and they have a right to be. And at first, you might be pissed off at the NFL and the NFL Players Association. But you can also look down the hall and say, all you had to do is put a needle in your arm for half a second. That's all you had to do. And you know what? We could go to dinner. We could chum it up. We could be working on film study together. But we can't now. You got to wear a mask in the facility. You can't come eat lunch with us. You got to get tested every day. The NFL is making things tougher on unvaccinated players, which I think is fair. Because as much as I don't like being told what to do 99.9% of the time, unless it's my boss, or if I'm in a work setting, that's fine. When I'm out of it, fuck off. Other than that, you can influence behavior, because we do it all the time. In real life, we do it. So this is no different. The NFL are influencing what they want, what they deem to be the correct measure. And so far, the science speaks to it. They're on the science is saying to the NFL, you're doing good here. You're on the right side of history. They've been on the wrong side of history too many times. So I'm not going to give them a huge pat in the back for doing this, because, again, I remember their faults. I know what they've done with some of these cases, with the Ray Rices, with potentially Deshaun Watson, with these players who they just royally screwed up. And you don't get a pass for that. For abuse of a spouse, or how they've handled certain situations, the Tyreek Hill situation, the Kareem Hunt situation. But in this case, just using one example in front of us, they're doing the right thing. And having an opposite opinion is completely fine, because guess what? I disagree with people all the time. I have this podcast, people talk to me and say, you're crazy about this, which I love. Let's have a conversation. Dialogue is so important in life, because thinking you're the only smart person in the room is idiotic, but you also need some hubris in your life. You need to be humbled. You need to have conversation that you might leave it saying, you know what, I still think I'm right, but I see his point. And maybe you go, okay, if all my neighbors are doing this, or my teammates in this case, who I respect, who I may even love, they're my brothers in arms. If they're choosing to do this and they think it's okay for their children and their wives and the people they hold dear, then why wouldn't it be for me? And that's not just about COVID. That's about anything. That's about our culture, Black Lives Matter, Indigenous rights, segregation. That was slavery. Having conversations with Black people just didn't happen. And when it finally did, it sparked social change. And it's got to happen. And the NFL, they are putting players in a position where they make their own decision. But if you want to risk losing a game check, now it's no guarantee that you're going to have somebody test positive. But the Colts head coach, Frank Reich, tested positive today. I haven't seen if he's vaccinated or not, but this is just for instance. This is a Monday. Regular season week 1, he is not coaching. He's the head coach. That's a big deal, especially in the NFL. I think you saw in the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Montreal Canadiens did okay without Dominic Ducharme for a few games. But then when you got to the Tampa series where you really needed to win, you needed Danault out there to go against Kucherov. Luke Richardson failed to do it. He's an assistant coach. He's not a head coach. Ducharme did a better job after that fact. The games were tighter. And it's just little things that can really affect your team. What if it's a starting quarterback? What if it's Tom Brady for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Blaine Gabbert's coming in. That's a seismic shift. The betting line would flip on its head. The outcome of the game would likely flip on its head. And, there's still the COVID. It's still here. In Canada, we're getting a lot better. Like I said, masks are leaving here in New Brunswick. We're starting to see the change that I've been wanting a long time ago. And maybe I needed some humility. I needed to just have a wait and see approach, which is probably true. I'm not the best when it comes to patience. I'm not the best when it comes to, doing what's right for everybody else, or siding with the majority when it comes to safety, rather than me, the junkyard dog who's just like, screw this. And maybe this is my time to kind of let that sink in. Do I still think I'm right? Yes. But like these NFL players, I'm seeing it through a different lens right now. And I'm glad. I'm honestly shocked that masks and we're going back to green in 4 days. My goal, I talked to my mother about it. She's was in the medical field. We've had big debates over this, and we've had good conversation, but at times where I'm just like so sick of it. But I'm shocked that we're doing it before September 1st. That was my target goal. And I'm thrilled that we're here before August. But I think, like my expectations, like my line of thinking, NFL players, people at large, a lot of Americans need to see it from the other side of the coin too. I see it from the opposition point of view where I don't want something in my body. I don't want people to tell me what to do. I get that completely. Because I was there not that long ago. I got vaccinated because for my mother. I told her that. I don't regret it. And I regret it less and less as we go on. But do you get vaccinated for your teammates? For your head coach? For your owner that's paying your salary? You're competing for the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, football is my favorite sport. So, of course, it's a biased opinion here. It is the best trophy in the world. I love the Stanley Cup. I think it's very tough to win. But the Stanley Cup final does not hold a candle to the Super Bowl. That's marked on everybody's calendar every year. You could not watch a game of football, but one day a year, the first weekend in February, your ass is on the couch at 7:30 to watch the Super Bowl. And maybe you're only there to watch the halftime show. But guess what? You're there. You have a chance to get there. Guys like DeAndre Hopkins, guys like Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette back with the Bucs. You won a Super Bowl last year. You have Tom Brady. You know your only expectation. Repeat. DeAndre Hopkins, you're in Arizona. You signed J.J. Watt. You got Kyler Murray. You signed A.J. Green. Chandler Jones is still under contract. Your goal is to win the NFC West and try to win a Super Bowl. This isn't Jacksonville. It would still be the same, but Jacksonville, if you could win 5 games this year, that would be a success. These are players on teams with expectations of win or bust. And I think you got to look in the mirror and think of the bigger picture. That my team, my long-term success, wealth, might be more important in this instance. And I'm also doing good by myself. I'm backing science. Let the crazy people like Tucker Carlson and Fox News spew off whatever the hell they're going to say. You guys are a fucking nut job. I'm going to do what's best for the greater good. I'm going to do for the whole. We'll see. The NFL is starting again. I love it. First preseason game is next week. We got Cowboys, Steelers in the Hall of Fame game. We'll dive into that. As every day goes on, I'm sure we'll have more and more NFL stories. We'll talk about them all here on To The Point. Football is I love it. From September to about December, Saturdays and Sundays are consumed at my residence, wherever that is, with college football Saturday, starting at about 1 p.m. till midnight. The next day, wash, rinse, repeat. 2 o'clock in the afternoon till about 12:30 NFL. There's nothing better than that to me. And we'll see what happens. I think it should be another crazy season. Fans back in the building. Hopefully we can get through this COVID wave early in the season here and progress forward. But NFL's got some decisions to make. We got some players reporting the COVID wave rolling through. But the NFL is back, and I couldn't be more excited about it. I didn't plan to lead with that on the show today, but just I didn't plan to lead with that. I talk a lot of hockey today. First, I thought I'd touch on the Olympics briefly. Opening ceremonies, I taped it. It's I'm sure people liked it. No patrons does hurt it for sure. I don't love the it's going to sound insensitive, but the cultural aspect, the dancing, that's everywhere. It could be here in Canada. I don't like how long it is. The speeches, kissing ass, and the sponsorships and everything. It's not for me. I'm sure the athletes get something very good. Naomi Osaka lighting the cauldron. Very cool scene. I'm a big fan. Her battle with mental health. So that's seeing her back on a public forum is great. I mean, she's doing at least good enough that she can get out there, be in the public eye, and do that. So that's fantastic. Now I have enjoyed it so far. I will say that. Like this morning at the gym, I'm on the treadmill, and I watched mountain biking, which was cool. When do I ever watch mountain biking? I enjoy swimming. I love to swim. It's one of my favorite pastimes. But watching Penny Oleksiak do what she does, the 14-year-old Canadian coming up fourth place, that was truly inspiring. The diving team getting a silver medal is cool. Now, I'll talk about our one goal here in a minute, but and again, I'm going to have more conversations with people about the Olympics, and I'll probably maybe can be swayed. But this is the opinion I believe in. I don't think there should be silver and bronze medals. And I get the pushback. Okay, they train for 4 years. This case, 5 years because of it being canceled last year. If you go home with nothing after 5 years of training, at least if you go into silver or bronze, you bring something home. And I get that. However, in no other sport do we promote, do we celebrate failure. The closest thing I can think of is when an upstart team that you don't expect, like the Montreal Canadiens, just for instance, nobody expected them to get the Stanley Cup final. Nobody expected them to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. Nobody expected them to beat the Vegas Golden Knights, but they did. But the adulation we had for them was gone after losing to the Tampa Bay Lightning, because it was a great Cinderella story. But was it a Cinderella story is when it comes true. The LA Kings of 2012 were a Cinderella story. From the 8th seed in the Western Conference to Stanley Cup champions, sweeping the Vancouver Canucks, who won the President's Trophy, one of the most dominant regular seasons in league history. Capping it off is the Cinderella story. That's where you get a little bit of minor celebration saying, well, they had a better year than I thought they would. But it's not adulation. It's not saying, well, that was great. There's two teams, because they're top of mind. Toronto Maple Leaf or Edmonton Oilers fan that are saying our teams had really great years because their regular seasons were dynamite. Both were pretty good. Connor McDavid won the Hart Trophy, and Ted Lindsay. Austin Matthews won a Rocket Richard. But who's saying, well, that was really great. We got to the playoffs when we sputtered out, but hey, put up a good fight. No, we don't. If I asked you right now, who came in third place in the NHL this year? I know it's New York Islanders, but did they get a bronze medal? No. They got a bunch of disappointment losing to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Vegas, fourth place. And I get it. It's a long slog, and you want to go home with something. But I have a hard time celebrating bronze or silver medals. I just do. And like medal counts, the country medal count. First of all, if you are leading the medal count and you have less golds than the team in second place, you should not be leading the medal count, because my theory, the only medal that truly matters is gold. Racking up bronze, say you had 8 medals and a country had 24. But the country who had 8 golds, and that other country had 4 golds and the rest are spattered through silver and bronze. I'll take the 8 because we won our heats. We didn't come in third or second and then third at the discus. And so I'm still going to watch. I watched a good chunk of our Canadian women's basketball team this morning. Kia Nursing Company play against Serbia. I watched the American men's basketball team lose to France, which I loved. Hope they lose again. Rooting for my country is the only time where I have a bias. I hope the American men's basketball team lose every game they play in. I love going to the U.S. Hope to go there sometime this year. But when Canada is up against them or they're in competition, sorry, that's just business. When Finland beat the United States 2 years ago at the World Junior Hockey Championships, it was a great moment for me because I didn't want the Americans to win. I wanted the Finns to win because it's a rivalry. Like Toronto, Montreal for a regular fan. For me, U.S., Canada, get out. Like people that said that Russia, Canada is more heated. What world? Not mine. Mackenzie McNeil wins a gold medal or 1 gold. Congratulations. Great to see. Hopefully that sparks some more activity. Gold medals. So again, I'm gonna keep watching the Olympics. I love it. It is good. I like watching sports that I normally don't get to see. In the second week, it's all track. That's dynamite to me. Track and field is like, the relays and the ice skating during the Winter Olympics. That's one of my favorite events, along with snowboarding. But obviously, I want the Canadian women's basketball team to rebound. Hopefully, they can put out a good showing here. And like I said, track. We have golf, tennis, but really the Olympics is about the sports that don't get a national platform. The other 365. And that's like judo and the discus and track and field for a good chunk of the population, and swimming. People will care. We saw it in Rio. People cared about Penny Oleksiak for 2 weeks. The second it ended, she was an afterthought. And that's not anything to do with her. That's just the way life works. They move on to team sports where that's the focus, or you pivot to tennis because the U.S. Open's upcoming, or you have the Rodgers Cup that's coming back to Canada this year after being postponed last year. So it's all, it's all right in front of you. And hopefully we see the Canadians continue to pile up some medals. If you hate my Olympic take, let me know in the comments. I know a lot of people do. I've had this debate with people, but it's my belief. We don't celebrate the Phoenix Suns. We don't celebrate the Montreal Canadiens. We don't celebrate the Kansas City Chiefs for losing in the biggest game. And that's just how I feel about it. And again, I might be totally wrong, but I'm glad the Olympics are started. I'm glad these athletes are being able to play. Hopefully there's no COVID issues. That would be terrible. We do see, in the world of golf, John Rahm was supposed to represent Spain. He tested positive for the second time in a couple of weeks. Then we had Bryson DeChambeau also test positive. He can't represent the United States. So it's still happening. People are still, I know Rahm was vaccinated. So we'll see. But COVID's still an issue. It's still affecting the world of sports and the world around us. But we're starting to see it dissipate a little bit, and hopefully that will continue over time here. And we'll keep talking about the Olympics the second we see more activity, more medals. I know there's some big debate because Simone Biles didn't have her best effort last night. I'll be interested to see how she fares in the medal and where the judges score her, because she's a big name in the gymnastics world, and somebody upsetting her or the judges not giving her a great score, I'm sure they feel a little pressure to promote her, because the Olympics, they don't have a name where you say, okay, we're going to tune in. They don't have Usain Bolt anymore. Michael Phelps isn't here. And because of COVID, because it hasn't really been promoted all that well, could you think of one Olympian? For Canada, I'm sure it'd be Penny Oleksiak. Other than her, who is around the world? Who are we thinking of? Because men's basketball, sure. You have Colin Morikawa just won the British Open, but is there an Olympian in a non-team sport that really stands out that you could market around? I'm not really sure there is. So, we'll see. But hopefully Canadians can win some more gold medals, and we'll keep tracking here into the point as the 2 weeks roll by here for the Olympics 2020, now 2021. Mentioned the NHL, and what a weekend it was with the NHL Draft. We have free agency starting Wednesday. Wednesday, this may be with somebody or it might just be by myself, but I'll be doing a live show on Facebook Live on Wednesday, where I break down all the free agent signings. I talk about what teams have done in free agency, look ahead to the roster. So that'll be a live show on Wednesday. That'll be Facebook Live. Expect that around 4:30, 5 o'clock. I'll keep you guys updated as I go along through the week. But that day should be a big day. We got MLB free agency this week as well. MLB trade deadline this week. We got the NBA draft. So it's a big sports week. But really some big moves, and I'm going to try to get to all of them today. But the biggest one to me, and it's just because of impact, is Seth Jones being traded from the Columbus Blue Jackets to the Chicago Blackhawks, and what this means. So Seth was traded for defenseman Adam Boquist, he's got a lot of potential. I think he's a really gifted offensive player. The number 12 pick in the draft Friday night, a second rounder, which was the 44th overall pick, and a first rounder in 2023. So a good haul for Seth Jones. But Seth Jones is a 26-year-old defenseman in the prime of his career, can play 30 minutes a night. And we've heard this conversation about, what a number one defenseman is. How many of them in the league? There isn't that many. And Columbus just lost one and Chicago gained one. They had one forever in Duncan Keith. He moved on. He's an elder statesman now. He goes to Edmonton to be the fourth, fifth defenseman there. Seth Jones is a number one defenseman, and he now occupies Chicago after it was a sign and trade, because he signed an 8-year, $9.5 million season contract with Chicago. His brother Caleb is now with the organization. So Stan Bowman is making some changes. Duncan Keith's gone. Brent Seabrook's retired. They hope Jonathan Toews can return this season. But Chicago now has the two best American-born players in the NHL on the same roster. To me, it's not even close. Patrick Kane, I think he's the best American-born hockey player of all time. I'm sure people would say maybe Mike Modano. Patrick Kane's got 3 cups. He's got a Hart Trophy. He's got a Conn Smythe. The guy just dominates. He's still playing at a very high level. Then you have Seth Jones, who his offensive game isn't, Cale Makar's, but his ability to play the entire zone, his physicality, the way he boxes people up in front of the net, and just how comfortable he is on the ice. I would take Seth Jones above anyone not named Victor Hedman in the NHL. To me, after it goes Hedman, Jones, and then there's a significant drop to the next defenseman. You could say Heiskanen, you could say Makar, potentially Quinn Hughes has potential to get better, but Seth Jones is that number 2 guy right now when it comes to being a number 1 defenseman and being at the top of the list. He's right behind Victor Hedman, and he's a huge body. But looking at Chicago, they got Kane. They want Taves. They hope Taves can come back. They still have Alex DeBrincat, who can be a 30 to 35 goal scorer, really, really gifted forward, and he's a key part of their future. They got Kirby Dach, who they drafted 3rd overall a couple years ago, had a broken collarbone this year, really injury-plagued season. But he looks like he's got a lot of promise, can play up the middle. Dylan Strome's been a good ad for them, originally drafted by Arizona. He's been a good find. In net, obviously, they got some question marks there with Colin Delia and Malcolm Subban's out the door. So where do they go with their net money position? Do they sign a guy in free agency? So that's a hole on their team. But their forward depth is not bad. They got some young. Brandon Hagel is a guy that I really like who can play bottom 6 minutes. Ryan Carpenter's a guy who's worked. But they'll look to increase their offensive firepower. Obviously, like I said, Kane and DeBrincat are great. But if you're playing together, you need another line to produce. Taves will likely be that fit. Doc, they can hope too that he can, again, continue to take that jump to be a top line forward. And supplement him with some good players with him. Maybe get something going here. But for Chicago, I don't blame them for doing this. Yes, you have Taves and Kane and now Seth Jones, who all make around 10 million. Jones at 9.5, but you got Kane and Taves at 10.5. However, it's not every day that you get a number one defenseman available. And maybe for the next year or two, Chicago isn't that great of a team. They aren't that competitive. But you have Seth for 8 years under contract. You need to make sure his brother's happy, develop him. And when you're ready, you have the best defenseman in the world. He'd be 28 years old, still in the prime of his career, and you can make a push. Kane does not look like he's slowing down anytime soon. And you don't just pass up number one defenseman, whether you feel you're in the doghouse or not, whether you feel you're close or you're a little farther away. I don't think Chicago's a Stanley Cup contender. However, could they be a playoff team? Yes, because Kane can still play. Seth Jones replacing Duncan Keith in that role for those minutes, it's not even close at this point. It's a man amongst boys if you're comparing those two. And you look at that division. St. Louis is in a state of transition. Tarasenko wants out. They just acquired Pavel Buchnevich. But Bennington wasn't great last year. What do they do moving forward? How do they look next year? Ryan O'Reilly's a year older. He's got a lot of wear and tear in that body. So the Central, Dallas, again, they had a tough year. They still have Ben Bishop, but how's Tyler Seguin going to come back? How does that team look? Nashville, again, another team. Really cashed hard against the cap. They trade away Ryan Ellis. They have UC Saros under contract, but still have Johansson and Duchesne, who have virtually been irrelevant in Nashville, haven't helped them win whatsoever. So what can they bring to the table? And then you look around that division, there are openings to see who can pry themselves through, who can win. Vegas is in the other division. So there's always an opportunity. And I think you look at Chicago and they're probably saying to themselves, you know what? We got a shot here. We got a decent shot to see what we can do. And, Minnesota looks like a good team. Colorado, definitely. But could you find a way to break through? I think you can. And with divisions going back the way they were, we'll see what happens. But I like what they're doing. I like that Seth Jones, even though they're not in a prime position to win a Stanley Cup next year, the year after, they're not afraid to sit and wait, have a player that they know is money, have him up ready, sitting on ice for when they are ready to compete and go for the Stanley Cup. For Columbus, they really had no choice. Seth Jones was going to leave and walk for nothing. Columbus has lost so many players and gotten nothing for them. The list includes Matt Duchene, Artemi Panarin, Sergei Bobrovsky, and you can't have another player just walk for nothing. So they got the 12th pick in the draft. They got the high second rounder at the 44th pick. Adam Boqvist, I think, has a lot of upside. I don't see him being a number one defenseman, but could he be a quarterback power play? quarterback of the power play. Yes, absolutely. I think he's got a lot of high-end skill when it comes to his offensive game. He's creative with the puck, and he continues to get better. I think he's really good. Chicago, obviously getting Seth Jones so that they're willing to part with him. He's a guy that they drafted hoping would be a part of their future. And for Columbus, Werenski's in the last year of his deal. Savard was traded last year. Gavrikov potentially may go back to Russia or leave in free agency. They need new defensemen. They need a new wave of players. Boquist can be the face of that. He can be their new, we'll see. I think he's more of a number 2, number 3 defenseman, but you got to start somewhere and just don't kill him with minutes. Don't kill him. Don't try to make him be something that he's not, because Columbus is going to be in the bottom 5 this year. I'd be shocked if they weren't. They also, over the weekend, they traded, longtime right winger Cam Atkinson to Philadelphia for Jakub Voracek. Voracek was originally drafted by Columbus, played a little bit in Columbus, but I see this as a move that's a little alarming. Clearly, Atkinson has had some injury problems, but he's got more game right now than Voracek. Voracek in Philly, his time had wore out. He's a guy that he just couldn't get it done. Him and Drew weren't good enough to get over the hump to get in the Stanley Cup conversation, and they decided to go in another direction. So Atkinson's a guy that can score. He's got a great shot when he's healthy, but we'll see what he can bring next year. We'll see what Voracek can bring in Columbus. At least he's a veteran that has been through wars. He's played in Philly in front of a tough fan base. Next year won't likely be an easy season for Columbus. Seth Jones is gone. Do they move Werenski at some point? Likely he's going to walk for nothing. So again, he's a guy that would fetch a pretty penny on the open market. So can you find a suitor for him? Can Voracek at least have a decent season? So there might be a team at the trade deadline that wants to take a look at him. So it's a changing roster. They got 2 goalies heading in next year to the last year on their deal. So with Merzlikins and Korpisalo. So a lot of change happening in Columbus, but they had to move Jones. They did, and good for Chicago. Seth goes, he's an American. He goes to Original Six franchise, probably the most noteworthy franchise in the United States of any market. And he's now a Chicago Blackhawk. Earlier Friday, before Seth Jones was acquired, the Vancouver Canucks made a splash. They're always in salary cap hell. Jim Benning has made some questionable signings, to say the least, over the last number of years. A lot of fans are questioning why the hell he's even still general manager, which is fair. But on Friday, he made a splash. He acquired Arizona Coyotes longtime captain Oliver Ekman-Larsson and former Moncton Wildcat right winger Connor Garland for Jay Beagle, Louis Eriksson, Antoine Roussel, the number 9 pick, which was Dylan Guenther in Friday night's NHL entry draft, a 2nd rounder in 2022, and a 7th rounder in 2022. So it was a big move. We've seen Arizona do this a few times. They acquired Gostisbehere. They get some draft picks. They're offloading money. You had Ekman-Larsson, who still has 5 years left at $8.25 million a season. Garland, who has, I believe, 4 years left, making north of $4.5 million. So it's a good move now for potentially paying later. The Canucks get out of some salary cap out because they had Beagle making $4 million a year. They had Roussel making $4 million a year for at least for 1 more year each. You had Louis Eriksson, who had a $7 million cap hit. He's hardly played a game in the last number of years. So you get some dead money off your books, basically. Beagle and Roussel are the same player. They're both 4th line centers making big money. It didn't make any sense when they signed those guys to those deals, and they at least get out of them. But looking at it, Vancouver gets better in the short term. Ekman-Larsson is a good defenseman. Again, I don't think he's a number 1 defenseman there. Jim Benning said we believe Ekman-Larsson's going to be a number 1 defenseman. It'll help Quinn Hughes a lot, lower his minutes, and allow him to settle in. That's a good hope because Ekman-Larsson was touted as this number 1 guy. as a guy who was going to be the savior in Arizona, because they haven't had much go right in Arizona over the last 2 decades. But it never happened. He didn't develop into a number one defenseman. He was always just really good, but making a ton of money, and that makes it tough for a team to win, where he's making 8.25 a year, and Arizona is one of the cheaper organizations in all of pro sports. And they just decided not gonna, we can't do this anymore. He had a full no trade, but Vancouver was one of the teams on his list, and he decided to go. For Vancouver, I think Ekman-Larsson he can be a solid guy. He's a number 2, number 3 defenseman. I think Quinn Hughes is in the same boat. Quinn Hughes is not good enough yet to be a number 1 defenseman. I don't know if he ever will be. He's got a lot of creative upside. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Vancouver put Ekman-Larsson and Quinn Hughes on the power play together, which I personally hate. But looking at their team, you have Elias Pettersson. Bo Horvat is a great creative player. JT Miller, who had a down year, I think a power play guy, can really be a factor on this team. But Ekman-Larsson's got a good shot. Quinn Hughes is probably the best passer on the Canucks roster. So one thing I can say that's positive right now is their power play is going to be a lot better. At least it should be on paper, because, like I said, Ekman-Larsson gets shots through screens. Quinn Hughes can set people up. You still have Elias Pettersson, who's out almost all of last year. He'll be sitting in his office on that side, and he can fire one-timers at the net. He's still a restricted free agent, so they're gonna have to figure out how much money he's going to be making, and keep their salary cap to a low roar. But they do make some strides. And Garland is no slouch either. He's got 47 goals in 164 regular season games, which isn't bad. 96 points in that time. A guy who was a late 5th round pick. In Moncton, he was a superstar, one of the best Q players you could say of all time. I never thought he'd make it to the NHL, but he's battled, and to his credit, he is here. And I don't see him being on the top power play unit, but you need a good second unit. I think Garland can be that guy for Vancouver. Be the anchor of that second unit, play second line right wing, be a factor. You got Pettersson, JT Miller, but will they put Garland with Horvat? I think that would be interesting. He's a way better player than a Tanner Pearson, who they've wanted to be established as an offensive guy. The guy's a depth forward who plays penalty kill, who will chip in a goal, every 5 or 6 games. Garland is a guy that will score and will be a factor on the ice. He's small, which is not great for playoff success, but he's creative. He can score goals. He can get into tight spaces. And even with his small stature, he's not afraid to mix it up. Arizona, like I said, I think they'll buy out Louis Eriksson. They have today and tomorrow, the last 2 days, that teams can buy out players. Louis Eriksson, I mentioned, has got 1 year left, $7 million on his cap hit. He's going to make less than $1 million in real money this year, because the contract was front loaded. So I could see him not playing in the NHL. Sure, just not playing, because $1 million for a guy who's made that much money, his career in the NHL is over. It's been over for a long time in Vancouver. That signing's never gone well. That in 2016, that was a terrible year, because you had Louis Eriksson go to Vancouver 7x7. You had Lucic go to Edmonton on a big ticket. He only lasted 1 year there. You had James Neal go to Calgary. He was only there 1 year. You had Kyle Oposo, who's still bleeding money in Buffalo. You had Franz Nielsen, who is turned out terrible for Detroit. So those are just a few of the names that were signed that year that were available. They all turned out to be bad. They all got long-term contracts. And since then, we've seen teams really try to bridge players, get 4-year deals, do different things when it's not a proven superstar. The 2016 year, you could really do a 30 for 30 and look back and say, this is where things changed. And we see that now. But Dylan Guenther is a good player for Arizona. They did not have a first round pick because they had to forfeit it because of John Chaika, maneuvering with the league and doing some tampering. So with this trade, they get back into the first round, which I think was important to Arizona. So they get Dylan Guenther. Vancouver obviously doesn't get a first-round pick. They get a prospect they can hope to nourish and, build them up a little bit. But good trade for both. I think Arizona, they want to get worse. Vancouver, this could hurt them down the road, but I do think it helps them right now. And they're in the Pacific Division. You have Seattle. Who knows how good they're going to be? I really like their defense score. Offensively, they leave something to be desired. Vegas will be a strong team. They re-signed Alec Martinez today for just shy of $5 million. They're still got Pietrangelo. They still got Stone. They're going to be motivated to be a really elite team again. Calgary, who knows? They lose Giordano. Do they get rid of Gaudreau and Monahan? I think they should, but can they find takers for them? Can they make those deals happen? They're not easy deals to pull off. So what happens with Calgary? Looking at LA, LA is in a state of transition right now, but is there time for LA to get better? Can they acquire a guy like Jack Eichel prior to the start of the regular season? So there's an opening for Vancouver to pounce here, and it's just, can they do it quick enough and potentially get back in the playoff hunt after missing out this year? I still don't think the roster is very good. Even with this trade, I don't think the roster is very good. You got Demko, which gives them a chance to improve their defense score, but up front, I still think they need some help, and we'll see if they can get some of that help come Wednesday and beyond. Another big signing over the weekend, it's heavy on defense here, but that's the way you win championships, getting elite defensemen. And we talked about Seth Jones being a number one defenseman. Well, Cale Makar, the defenseman for the Colorado Avalanche, is a number one defenseman as well. He signed a 6-year, $54 million extension with the Avalanche, which comes out to be $9 million a season. And it jumps over Nathan MacKinnon, which I didn't think it would be that much of a discrepancy. But I think for Nathan MacKinnon, you can look at it and say, yeah, he's not $3 million better than me, but Cale Makar is at least a number one defenseman, and he could have gotten more in the open market. Looking at contracts teams give out, they'll at least love to give guys plus $10 million. Edmonton loves to do it. Washington will do it. So Cale Makar could have got more money, but he signed in Colorado where they believe that they can win down there. And their lineup could be very different come Wednesday. Their captain's going to be UFA, it looks like. Doesn't sound very good that he's going to be re-signed. Philip Grubauer, who was nominated for the Vezina, could very well walk. He's going to be unrestricted free agent. So how does that go? Brandon Saad's unrestricted free agent, who scored 20 goals last year in a really resurgent season coming over from Chicago. So where does this team go? You had to get rid of Ryan Grace to the expansion draft. And keeping Makar is important because, like I just said, you're hoping to win in the near term, but also Makar's an elite player. He's a guy that I think he's a number one defenseman in this league. The way he moves the puck, his skating ability is just off the charts. And you don't let players like that leave your organization. They want to win. They're going to, if they don't keep Grubauer, they're going to have to make a move because they need to be aggressive. Their window to win is the next few years. Hopefully you can bring back Nazem Kadri. You have Makar. You have McKinnon. You have Mikko Rantanen. Can Landeskog return? We'll see. But you're in the window to win a championship right now. Last year was obviously a big failure. You lost to a great Vegas team, but in my opinion, they should have won. So now you have to look back and say, what can we do differently? And losing Makar is not an option. And credit to Joe Sakic for getting a deal done for free agency before anything else can happen. And a team could potentially give Cale Makar an offer sheet where Colorado has to match it, but for way more money. And then, they're put in a tough spot as an organization. I mentioned Philly. They were busy. They traded Jake Voracek. They also acquired Rasmus Ristolainen, who was a former first-round pick of the Buffalo Sabres. Really, a guy who's been polarizing in Buffalo. Really a fan favorite. Sometimes booed. But they get him for the 14th overall pick. Robert Hagg, who's got another year in his contract, originally drafted by Philly, and a 2023 second. So a good haul, a position player, and then two high picks. But for Philly, they got Ryan Ellis, they got Ristolainen. They're hoping this decor with Provorov, Justin Braun, still with Travis Sanheim, can be effective, can be a winning look. You lose Voracek, which I think was smart. They needed to find a way to get him off the books. Taking on Atkinson, it's a problem for a problem, but I take Atkinson full health right now over Jake Voracek. Do they keep Drew? I look at their forwards and say, Konechny's got more there. You bet. He definitely does. I look, Joel Farabee is a guy that I think can be a 65, 70-point player. He's got a bright future in front of him. But how many forwards? Scott Lawton's going to be a third, fourth line guy. That's his ceiling. They re-signed him long term, but he's not getting much better than that. So where do you go with your forwards up front? And you have a lot of guys that are immature, that make stupid decisions, and that needs to be rectified too. Where does Carter Hart go? Can he rebound? He was a flat-out disaster last season. There's no easy way to put it. The guy lost every bit of confidence he had, and he looked like Boo Boo the Fool. So can he rectify his issues? And I like how they're approaching it. You see Seattle, you see Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay had elite forwards. They were a super team, really. But you build from the back end out. Ellis, good player. Ristolainen, very good player. Provorov, a guy who I think has the potential to be a number one defenseman. If anybody says he is one right now, we can talk. He isn't. Braun, again, a guy who's got playoff experience, who's gritty, who's got that edge to him. So I like the way they're constructing their defense core. But what do they do up front is the big question. Can Konechny have a bounce back season? Does Claude Giroux have more in the tank? Can Farabee even take a bigger jump this year in his play? And do they have some depth forwards in-house that can really help this team continue to evolve and be a playoff contender after missing the postseason last year? Let's talk about Sam Reinhart and Sam Bennett in a second, with Florida making a number of moves. But I should have mentioned this when I talked about Vancouver earlier, but yesterday, Vancouver bought out Jake Virtanen, their former first round pick, highly touted, was the captain for Team Canada at the World Juniors. Stupid penalty in the quarterfinal game, cost us the tournament. Fuck you. But that's history. The guy he gets bought out 1 year left in his deal. He's in some trouble right now because he's in a sexual misconduct case. It doesn't look good. He got suspended at the end of last year, put on leave. So who knows where this goes? I don't suspect this guy will be signed prior to the start of next season until his court rulings are finalized and things like that. But Jake Virtanen had all the potential in the world. He had all the talent. He had so much talent. The guy was oozing talent. He could shoot the puck. He was a heavy body. The guy, if you just look at him and say, what's this guy's potential? He could have been a lesser but still very effective Eric Lindros. Look at their body types. They're the same guy. Virtanen, when he was playing at his best, would go out there and just destroy people. And he had the offensive firepower to back it up. He'd get on the ice. He'd move people around the ice. He'd go score a goal. You could do nothing about it. But he never could do it consistently. And that's what's so frustrating for if you're Vancouver Brass, you got to say, this guy could have been a star in this league. But his inability, his work ethic was so porous that we just couldn't make it happen. It's completely on Jake Virtanen. You could have been a star. You could have been a big contributor, but you turned out to be just a pain in the ass. Vancouver had to healthy scratch him. Travis Green had to try to find a position for him because every year he'd come into camp in such bad shape. I've never liked him. I was more frustrated with him more than anything that he didn't do more in his career to see what he could do to get better. You see guys like Yanni Gourde who are undrafted. The guy's got 3% body fat. He worked his ass off to get better. Jake Virtanen doesn't do 1/4 of the work that Yanni Gourde does. And it shows. Because Virtanen's got way more skill than Yanni Gourde. But Yanni Gourde's got more work ethic. He's also got more heart than Jake Virtanen. And it shows he's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. And Seattle really wanted him. Seattle could have had Virtanen for nothing. They didn't even think about it. And I just think it's really sad that this guy had all the opportunity, he had all the skill, and he didn't capitalize on it. And we do see that. I think of Ryan Leaf in the NFL. He had problems with opioids, with painkillers, Oxycontin. He had all the potential. He was in Peyton Manning's draft. People liked Ryan Leaf more than they liked Peyton Manning. We talked about his addictions, but also his work ethic sucked. Peyton Manning wanted to be great. Ryan Leaf wanted to be Ryan Leaf, the quarterback, the famous guy, the partier. Johnny Manziel, another guy who comes to mind who had all the potential. I love them. Johnny Money, Texas A&M, ruling the world. But again, the focus wasn't on what got you to be famous. Jake Virtanen, people didn't care. You wanted to be a great player? Well, you're a hockey player first. Then what you do off the ice, what you do beyond that is completely irrelevant. You need to be a hockey player first. Hopefully he can turn his career around. If these legal issues, hopefully he can settle them. If not, good luck to him. But this is just such an opportunity wasted where he was a guy that should have been a guy who made $7 to $9 million a year, being one of the great power forwards in the game, who could score 30 goals, get 80 points, and be a freight train on the ice. But unfortunately, all that talent was wasted because of a little to no work ethic. Over the weekend, we saw Sam Reinhart, led the Buffalo Sabres in points last year. He was traded to the Florida Panthers for goalie Devin Levi, who was a starting goalie for Canada at the World Junior Hockey Championship this past season, and a 2022 first-round pick. You got Sam Reinhart's a really good player. Florida wants to continue to get better. You got Barkov, you got Huberdeau. Just continue to add to those lines. I think Reinhart will be great in Florida. Obviously, Buffalo's moving on. He wanted out. And then earlier today, they re-signed Sam Bennett he signed a 4-year, $4.4 million a year contract. He started his career in Calgary, going 4th overall, had his struggles, but really found his stride last year in Florida. Change of scenery seemed to really do some good for Sam. And I hope that continues because he's a great guy that really deserves it. I think he's a guy that worked his ass off. I'm a huge fan of his game. I do think he could have been a replacement for a guy like Zach Hyman in Toronto. He does play some center, but I like him better on the wing. And he's got that sense of style. I think Toronto's wanted Sam Bennett for years, but they couldn't get their hands on him. Florida has him for a couple of months, and they say, you're staying here. We like you. And they give him that security, making over $4 million a year, staying in a pretty good tax state. And we'll see. This is just reported, but it sounds like Aaron Rodgers and the Packers are going to reach an agreement where he's going to come back. He's going to come back for training camp. He's going to have the 2023 year in his contract. The last one, his current deal will be voided with no tags allowed in the future, meaning he would be a free agent following next year. The Packers would agree to review Rodgers' situation at the end of the season. Rodgers' contract would be adjusted with no loss of income to give the Packers more cap room now. So basically, he's going to let the team get better, but after this year, he'd be able to walk if he chooses to do so. It sounds like Devontae Adams, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, has also stopped talking to the Packers about re-signing a new contract, and he could be gone as well. Also, Frederick Anderson, the Leafs former starting goaltender, wants to come back to Toronto. It's been reported, but he's yet to receive an offer from the Maple Leafs. That's from his agent. No offer's been made. So I think that's one of the most important things. The Leafs don't have a number one defenseman, but they do have a strong top four with Hall and Muzzin and Morgan Riley and TJ Brody. Jack Campbell's only played 26. The most starts he's had in his career in the NHL is 26. That was 2 years ago with split between LA and Toronto. They need a guy with experience to really be able to play at least half of those games. To expect Jack Campbell to play 50 games this year, I think is idiotic. And you expect him to continue to play in the playoffs. I'm fine with the Leafs brass thinking he's our number one. He's a guy that could do great things for us moving forward. But to not have a plan in place is really stupid, and they need to do something about it because it's not going to go well for them, in my opinion. So it's interesting for sure. We also saw a few minor league signings today. But the NHL Draft was over the weekend, and Buffalo was on the clock, and they took the presumptive number 1 overall pick, Owen Power from Mississauga. I think this is the right pick. Huge kid, really good skill coming out of Michigan. And the biggest thing I can take from the draft just as a whole, see a lot of former NHLers' sons get taken, which is always interesting, seeing the bloodline. But I've mentioned this to Craig Eagles, who used to scout for the Q. I believe the NCAA in the next decade will surpass the NHL as surpass the CHL as the best pipeline and the most pro-ready league to the NHL. Meaning, if you go to a Michigan, if you go to a Wisconsin, it's the best way to be ready to play in the NHL right away. You obviously in the CHL, you don't have to. You could play at 7. You could go and just say, I'm playing in the NHL this year. I'm 18 years old. You know what? I'm not going back to junior if you're a player like, Nathan McKinnon or, guys who went through the Q route. But if you want to play against men in your draft eligible year and just go 1 year to school, I would rather do that than go to the CHL. We've seen guys do it and it doesn't help. Yeah, they rip up that league, but then they get to the NHL and it's not the same. You're playing against some guys that will never play pro, but you're also playing against men. You're playing in a tougher league, in my opinion. And you're also getting schooling. I think parents, it's an easy sell for parents. It's a controlled environment. And you look at this year's draft, Owen Power goes 1 to Buffalo, Michigan. Number 2 pick, Seattle Kraken, their first pick in franchise history. They select Matty Beniers. I believe he'll be an elite player. He's a guy I worry about, though, in Seattle because they didn't draft any great offensive players. So if he makes the team out of camp, how much pressure is going to be on him to produce? I think a guy like Cole Caulfield, Matty Beniers could have the same problem, even though Beniers is a lot taller. They have that. Luke Hughes, he didn't play at NCAA, but he did play U.S. National Development Program. So again, that's not the Q. You got 5, Kent Johnson, Michigan. Michigan had 3 players go in the top 5 Friday night. It's pretty damn impressive. And you also had in the top 10, Brian Boucher's son go to the Senators. I just see the NCAA, even though I hate the NCAA, I think it's one of the most crooked organizations in life, just in general when it comes to businesses, the way they've handled things. I think college football is getting rid of it, but I think they could make it back up in hockey because I think it's a better way to be ready to play in the NHL sooner. If you go to school, you play some hockey there, and guess what? You go high. You don't have to play in the CHL to be a high draft pick. Just go dominate, be the best player. But congrats to all those kids, especially Evan Noss from the Moncton area going in the second round. Congratulations, Evan. I know my sister has trained with him. They played against each other before, so good to see him go in the draft. And, it was a big weekend in the world of sports, and I'm sure it's going to continue. Like I said, Free Agent Frenzy on Wednesday. That'll be a live show, Facebook Live. We will do that. We'll talk about it all, break it all down. And anything that comes tomorrow, I'll be doing my show with Seamus as I normally do on Tuesday. But if anything happens, we'll talk about it tomorrow as well. So hope you guys all had a great weekend. We're back. Going to have a lot of programming this week. Like I said, we got the We got NBA draft. We got NHL free agency. Football starting. We got the Olympics. We got the MLB trade deadline. So a lot happening. We got some live shows. Try to get some guests in. It's going to be August, but we're firing all cylinders here, and we're excited to do it here to the point. So have a great night, everybody. Take care, and we'll talk soon.